Spring 1943, Gare de Bayonne. In the line for the morning train, a German Feldgendarme methodically checked papers. His eyes passed over a 16-year-old girl in a faded dress and beret, standing slightly ahead of a tall, awkward man in ill-fitting work clothes. She offered her Osways with a polite smile, chattering about visiting a sick aunt in Saint-Jean-de-Luz. The man behind her, a 6 feet 2 inches B-17 pilot from Kansas, stared vacantly, playing the part of her deaf-mute cousin. The guard glanced between the innocent schoolgirl and the seemingly simpleton laborer. Bored, he waved them through. This scene, a masterpiece of minimalist theater, was not an accident. It was a repeatable, calculated bluff. That teenager was the most vital link in a secret railroad that ran through the Nazi Empire. While the Gestapo hunted seasoned spies, she used her youth as an invisible shield, personally guiding 47 downed Allied airmen, one by one, through checkpoints, safe houses, and perilous Pyrenees passes to neutral Spain and freedom. The cognitive dissonance was absolute. The Nazi security state, a machine of suspicion and terror, was consistently defeated by a schoolgirl's smile and a rehearsed story. It was a psychological masterclass, exploiting the enemy's fatal blind spot. Their inability to conceive of a child as a lethal threat to their fortress Europe. But how did a girl barely out of childhood become one of the war's most effective smugglers? And what does her story reveal about the hidden strengths that tyranny cannot comprehend? To understand the lethal stakes of her errand, Gestapo wanted posters and escape line operational security manuals show we must first grasp the monstrous machine she was tricking. The machine arrayed against her was monstrously efficient. A specialized, multi-layered manhunt operated across occupied Europe. The Abwehr, military intelligence, the Geheime Feldpolizei, secret field police, and the Sicherheitsdienst, SS security service, collaborated to infiltrate, dismantle, and exterminate escape lines. They employed informants, radio direction finding, and surveillance at travel hubs. Their interrogation methods were designed to break human will through torture. The penalty for aiding a downed airman, the crime of Feindbegünstigung, favoring the enemy, was unambiguous. Summary execution or deportation to a concentration camp like Ravensbrück or Mauthausen, a virtual death sentence. This reflected the broader Nazi commando order ethos. Those operating clandestinely behind their lines were outside the conventions of war, deserving only extermination. The security focus was predictably narrow. Checkpoints were primed to scrutinize military-aged men, the profile of an evader or a resistance fighter. Travel papers, work permits, and eye contact were dissected for flaws. Their system was brutally logical, but its logic was rigid. It was trained to see threats in a specific form: adult, male, furtive, and strong. This created a profound systemic blind spot. The regime's ideology and bureaucratic mindset could not conceive of a young girl as a strategic threat. She was part of the background, part of the conquered populace to be controlled or ignored, not a primary vector of operational defiance. In their calculus of suspicion, she registered as zero. As the net tightened, the escape networks grew more desperate and ingenious. And in the files of MI9, the British Escape Service, a new strategy emerged. Recruit the people the Nazis would never see as a threat. The escape line was a fragile human chain stretched across a minefield. It required a clandestine army, forgers to create identities, safe housekeepers to offer shelter, and couriers to pass messages. But the most perilous link was the guide, the person who physically escorted the conspicuous evader from one safe point to the next. The evader himself was often a walking beacon of suspicion. Tall, athletic, with a military bearing, poor language skills, and an accent that could betray him with a single word. The guide, therefore, needed more than courage. They needed a perfect, unshakable alibi for traveling with this anomaly. Adult men were instantly scrutinized as potential resistors. Adult women were also suspect, as the Germans were aware of female resistance involvement. The ideal guide was someone whose very presence lowered the sentry's guard. Someone whose existence was so non-threatening it rendered the accompanying oddity invisible by association. The operational stakes were absolute. A single failed interaction at a checkpoint could doom not only the guide and evader but, through subsequent interrogation and torture, unravel the entire network. leading to the arrest, torture, and execution of dozens of patriots up and down the line. Each mission was a high-wire act where the balance depended on the psychological impression made in a 10-second encounter with a bored, suspicious, or zealous German guard. Into this deadly calculus stepped a volunteer whose greatest qualification was her face. Debriefing reports from grateful airmen consistently described their guide with the same word: just a kid. The strategy was a masterpiece of applied psychology. The escape line leaders didn't use young girls as guides out of desperation. They chose them as the optimal tactical instrument. The cover story was a carefully crafted script that leveraged societal stereotypes. The most common roles cast the evader as a deaf-mute or simple-minded cousin under the girl's care, a brother traveling to a family funeral, or a distant relative she was escorting to a new job. These stories played on ingrained perceptions of young women as natural, non-threatening caregivers, making the presence of a slow or silent man pitiable rather than suspicious. Preparation was meticulous, if informal. She would memorize every detail of the forged papers, names, dates, addresses, and drill the fabricated family history. She learned to control her physiology. Steady hands, even breathing, a gaze that was polite but not challenging. She often scouted the route alone first, noting checkpoint routines and safe spots. The true innovation was psychological. This tactic weaponized the Nazis' own ideological and social blinders. In a worldview obsessed with Aryan male martial prowess, a teenage French girl was part of the conquered landscape, a demographic beneath strategic notice. Her very insignificance in their eyes was her armor. The emotional burden, however, was colossal. She had to project a facade of girlish calm while internally managing her own terror and the palpable fear of the man she guided, a man who was often twice her size and age. She was a child performing with the steely resolve of a veteran operative, her success depending on her ability to convincingly play the part of someone who was not a threat. As one evader later marveled, she had the nerves of a general and the face of an angel. The Germans never saw the general. With a cover story set, the journey began. German railway police reports from the period, analyzing suspicious travel, reveal they were looking for couples, lone men, and groups, never for a teenager shepherding a single, awkward companion. The journey began in the silent anxiety of a safe house. The airman was transformed into a poorly tailored civilian, his hands coached to hang awkwardly, his posture slouched. The final, whispered instruction: "Look at your feet. Let me talk." Stepping onto the street was like stepping onto a stage under a hostile spotlight. Every passing Feldgendarmerie vehicle was a potential catastrophe. At the station, the girl performed the first act of her play. Approaching the ticket window, counting out the exact change for 2 third-class tickets to Dax or Biarritz, making innocuous chatter about the weather with the clerk. On the platform, they took up a position of studied irrelevance. She might read a book or eat a piece of fruit with deliberate calm, a portrait of mundane waiting. The airman would stare at the tracks, wrestling the instinct to scan for threats. The enemy was everywhere. Pairs of German military police with Schmeisser submachine guns, the sinister French milice in their berets, hungry for the reward money for turning in an Allied airman. The air itself seemed thick with suspicion. The purchase of the ticket was just an audition. The main performance came on the train. Finding a compartment, they would sit, the rattle of the wheels a tense percussion to their silence. Then, the sound of the corridor door sliding open, the tramp of boots. The conductor, accompanied by a German soldier, would begin his methodical check. As the boots drew closer, the tension became a physical weight. Every second stretched, every rustle of a paper or clearing of a throat in the compartment felt like a provocation. Then the door slides open. The uniform fills the frame. In her debriefs to MI9 after the war, the girl would say these were the moments she lived for, not in spite of the fear, but because of it. It was the test she was born to pass. The climax came not in a blaze of gunfire, but under the fluorescent glare of a border post interrogation room. A Zollgrunschutz officer, sharper than most, was unsatisfied. He peppered the girl with questions about her deaf-mute cousin, his birthplace, his mother's maiden name, the exact address of the sick aunt. Her answers, though memorized, had to be delivered without a flicker of hesitation. Then, he turned to the airman, barking a sudden question in German. Was sind ihr Papier? The airman, following his script, stared dumbly ahead, a slight drool on his chin from the concentration of not reacting. The officer's eyes narrowed. Suspicion hardened into certainty. In that heartbeat, the girl shifted tactics. Her composed innocence shattered. Her face crumpled, and she burst into genuine, frustrated tears. "He cannot hear you. He cannot speak," she sobbed, her voice rising in public indignation. "Are you happy now? Must you torment him? Here." She fumbled in her bag, producing a forged doctor's note about traumatic mutism. She was no longer a subject of interrogation. She was a distraught relative causing a scene. The officer was now in a lose-lose situation. Persisting meant escalating a messy, emotional public incident with a civilian girl over a seemingly genuine invalid. The expedient path was clear. Flustered and embarrassed, he gruffly stamped their papers and shoved them toward the door with a dismissive wave. The performance had turned his diligence into a social embarrassment. The turning point was seismic. Surviving such direct, probing scrutiny proved that the bluff, when played with absolute conviction, could bend even a determined official's will. Once safely beyond sight, the guide's tears would stop, replaced by a shaky, determined calm. The airman, his own legs weak with adrenaline, would feel a gratitude so profound it bordered on awe. They would walk in silence for a mile, the bond between them forged in that minute of shared, naked peril. 47 times she faced variations of this test. 47 times she won. And as the last of her charges crossed the Pyrenees or boarded a clandestine boat to England, her legend was already being written in the secret files of MI9. She was a single, vital cog in a vast secret machine. Her bravery was enabled by a network. The forger who crafted her papers, the controller who gave her orders and funds, the safe housekeepers who provided shelter, the mountain guides who took the final, brutal leg. Her success was a collective victory, and her vulnerability was shared by all. The cost of this work was extracted not in a single moment, but over years. She lived a double life, her mind a locked compartment separating her clandestine acts from her outward existence. The constant, low hum of fear for her family, the trauma of near captures, and the grief when parts of her network were inevitably rolled up by the Gestapo, comrades arrested, tortured, executed, or vanished into the concentration camp system, scarred a childhood already stolen by war. The historical record for many such individuals is a somber ledger. Some, like André de Jong, founder of the Comet Line, were captured, imprisoned, and miraculously survived. Others perished. Many who survived retreated into a determined, quiet anonymity after the war, their extraordinary deeds known only to the men they saved and buried in the classified archives of intelligence services. They returned to ordinary lives carrying the invisible weight of memories too harrowing to share. Theirs was a sacrifice not just of safety, but of innocence and peace of mind. The immediate victory was 47 men returned to the fight. But in the grand strategy of MI9, her work was a tactical masterpiece that justified the entire dangerous enterprise of escape lines. The strategic value of her work was monumental and meticulously quantified by MI9. Each of the 47 men she returned was a high-value asset, a trained pilot, navigator, or bombardier whose expertise had cost thousands of pounds and months to cultivate. Their return was a direct reinforcement of the Allied order of battle, denying the Germans a propaganda coup and conserving precious human capital. Beyond their combat skills, each evader was an intelligence goldmine. Thoroughly debriefed, they provided real-time, ground-level data on German troop dispositions, morale, checkpoint procedures, and the effectiveness of evasion aids, creating a feedback loop that constantly refined the escape line's tradecraft. The impact on Allied aircrew morale was perhaps the most profound, if immeasurable, effect. Knowing that a clandestine army of ordinary citizens, a schoolgirl, a farmer, a priest, risked torture and death to bring them home transformed the psychological landscape of flying over occupied Europe. It turned a potential death sentence into a survivable ordeal, making crews more willing to press home attacks. This was a formidable, intangible force multiplier. Propaganda on the home front also celebrated these stories, highlighting Allied ingenuity and the solidarity of occupied peoples, while demonizing the Nazi regime's brutality. Every successful crossing was a blow against the myth of Fortress Europe and a testament to the unbreakable will of those living under its shadow. Historians now see these escape lines not as sideshows, but as a crucial front in the psychological war. And at the sharp end of that front walked a girl with a secret, embodying a form of courage that no amount of military training could create. This story holds profound significance in reshaping our understanding of modern warfare and resistance. It stands as a paramount example of how total occupation militarizes civilian society in unexpected ways, proving that the war was won not only by soldiers on battlefields, but by unassuming heroes on train platforms and country lanes. It forcefully rewrites the narrative of women in war, shattering the limiting archetypes of passive victim or supportive nurse. This girl was an active, frontline combatant in a clandestine war, her weapons an impeccable performance of innocence and a steely psychological resilience. Her gender and age were not handicaps. They were her most effective pieces of tactical equipment, precisely because they were devalued by the enemy's ideology. Her legacy also forces us into the uncomfortable ethical territory of the weaponized child. The Resistance's calculated use of her youthful appearance was born of a desperate, existential struggle, a tragic answer to a regime that recognized no moral limits. This raises enduring questions about the boundaries of resistance and the exploitation of innocence, even for a just cause, a debate that continues to shadow modern asymmetric conflicts. As historians like Margaret Collins Whites argue, she represented the ultimate subversion, turning the Nazi worldview against itself. Her courage redefined heroism, demonstrating that it could wear a school dress and carry a textbook, that the greatest strength could lie in the ability to remain calm while quietly, relentlessly, dismantling the machinery of oppression from within its blind spots. So, what is the ultimate haunting lesson from this story of a girl, a secret, and 47 men living on her smile? The ultimate lesson is that in warfare, the most decisive weapon can be the one the enemy's ideology renders invisible. The Nazis constructed a police state to catch spies and soldiers, not to suspect schoolgirls. Her greatest tactical advantage was their own contempt for her perceived irrelevance. She didn't fight with a rifle, but with a performance of normalcy so flawless it became a form of genius. In a world ruled by overt brutality, her strength was her apparent fragility. This story is a monument to the unsung heroes of the shadows, those whose battles were fought in railway carriages and on mountain paths, whose victories were tallied not in captured ground, but in lives quietly, defiantly saved. As an MI9 summary report concluded in 1945, the contribution of young female couriers to our escape lines cannot be overstated. Their gender and age provided the perfect camouflage. One, known to us as Codename, is confirmed to have personally escorted 47 Allied airmen to safety, a record of efficiency and courage that remains unsurpassed. This story is hidden in the debriefing files of men who never forgot her face. If you want to uncover more true stories of the hidden heroes who fought World War II without a uniform, subscribe. We follow the escape lines. Next time, we'll descend into the darkness. The night witches of the Soviet Air Force. How young female pilots in flimsy wooden biplanes terrorized the German army is a story of courage from the Eastern Front that defies belief. History holds its breath. Sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone assumes is harmless.